Good afternoon, everybody. I'm fairly conscious that you've got a lot of people to listen to today, so I'm actually going to personally guarantee you that at least half of you in the room today will really enjoy my short presentation. That's because we're back at Family Fortunes. In a recent survey of 100 conference delegates, it was actually discovered that 25% of you are likely to be listening to me. 25% of you are going to be worrying about what's going on back at work, what you're going to have for dinner, the assignments you've got to put in tomorrow, and the final 50% of you are going to be fantasizing. Now, as long as you're not fantasizing about me, then that's completely fine. So, as Fred said, I'm Chris Wills. I'm the general manager of the Roxburghe Hotel in Edinburgh. And at this conference last year, I was lucky enough to be awarded with a HIT Leadership Scholarship. So I'm going to change my slides. The scholarship enabled me to attend Cornell University, which is in upstate New York. Cornell is basically has a world-renowned school of hotel administration. This is an Ivy League campus, which costs around $20,000 per term to send young American students there. Now, before you're thinking that there's absolutely no money left for the rest of your scholarships, and that is quite a lot of £20 notes in envelopes at the industry dinner, I'm also pleased to tell you that they also run a very intensive learning experience, which is called the General Managers Program. And this is a 10-day learning experience. Visiting and studying at Cornell, for me, was a career-long ambition, and it's certainly at the top of many general managers' personal development wish lists. I was lucky enough to be accompanied by two other scholars, Neil Ellis, who's the general manager of the Point Hotel in Edinburgh, and also John Wilson, who's the managing director of Career Hotels here in Scotland. So the three musketeers, as we were, ventured off over to America. General Managers Program in June 2008 consisted of 66 general managers representing 30 countries and 5 continents. Companies that were represented included Hyatt, Westin, people from Atlantis, Marriott, Ramada International, Intercontinental, and Jumeirah. And in fact, Mr. Crawford speaking to you this afternoon, out of the 66 people, 6 of them work for Jumeirah. So therefore, you get an indication of their approach to personal development. These general managers operated hotels all across Europe, India, the Caribbean, Mexico, Malawi, Colombia, literally all over the world, and probably some of the most amazing and talented people that I've ever actually had the fortune of journey working with. The learning environment is fairly formal, lectures, group workshops, case studies, and homework each night. This is the general manager homework, you know. It's been a while. It was quite interesting, but it was great, fantastic working with people. What I wanted to do, though, is to give you an understanding of how amazing the actual lecturers were. These are world-renowned people who, when not lecturing, they're actually offering their services as highly paid consultants, as authors and researchers, and they produce probably some of the best management information available. Most of the topics were actually delivered in one-day lectures and themes. So just to give you a little bite-sized summary of some of the things that we learned, this is going to be your kind of whistle-stop core of Cornell, as it were. Kathy Enns is a fantastic lecturer. She taught us about creating sustainable competitive advantages. But actually what she taught us about that is that all competitive advantages have a limited life. So in my business, if I think I've got anything ahead of anybody else, the moment I realize I have that, then it's probably gone. And it isn't really so much a question of if what you do will be duplicated, it's a question of when. And therefore you have to try to find ways to do things differently. Kate Walsh taught us about leadership and ethics. And the summary points I took from that is that with all the decisions that you make in any day, in any business, you have to be comfortable with your reasoning and decision making if the decisions that you made were to be published on the front page of tomorrow's newspapers. Maybe applies to bankers now, but anyway, back then it was all just about hospitality. Next was Bruce Tracy, who taught us about human resources strategy. For those of you involved in HR in the room, interesting to note that the main point we took from that is that HR has to be viewed as an investment, not just necessarily an expense, and that you have to find ways to evaluate your HR costs and calculate a return on investment for the work that you do with HR. We learned about self-awareness and successful leadership from a lady called Pam Strausser. And it's interesting because I suppose it's what today's all about, really. She really sort of hit home to us that the fundamental part of any hospitality business is about relationships. And it's all about the interactions and focus on building, maintaining, and improving those relationships. Personally, one of the people that I got the most out of was a gentleman called Chekitan Dev, who lectured on strategic marketing. His great theory is that there's actually something called co-opetition, which is where you have to compete. It's kind of the new form of competition. You actually compete against the weaker players in your market set and actually cooperate with the stronger players. So co-opetition. We were back with Kathy Enns for another day, studying managing change. Obviously, it's a continuously changing business that we all work in. She actually taught us that it's really important to remember how we introduce change is just as important as the change itself, and that many people fail when introducing change because they don't plan the process of actually how they will manage through the change. They just focus on where they want to get to. A gentleman called Steve Carvell taught us about measuring value creation in hotels, which was actually about getting maximum value back for owners. But we'll move on from that because they've got lots of money in any case. Jean Derouse, Hotel Asset Management, talked about how a good hotel asset manager is somebody who appreciates the value created by a brand that a hotel operates as much as the actual operator of the hotel. And that the best asset managers or general managers are people who can get the best value contribution from both the brand and the operating company. Strategic operations management, completely different approach. Those of you who maybe work in operations or want to work in operations, this was really highlighting to us that all good operational decisions require good data, and if you want to control operations, you must be able to track and analyze performance. So this guy had spreadsheets coming out of his ears about breakfast ratios and all sorts of different things, but it was really fascinating. A critical thing for us, distribution channel management. We spent a day working on that with a gentleman called Bill Carroll, who really highlighted to us the importance of displaying and presenting information consistently and competitively across all channels. So it's more about the information that you have on your website, other people's websites, but certainly was a fascinating day. A highlight for me was working with a gentleman called Ali Kaziki, who is the general manager of the Montage Hotel in Beverly Hills, probably one of the top general managers in America, and he worked with us studying the role of a general manager in the 21st century. Something he taught us that I really took away from that was that at some point in the next decade, we would be challenged to change in ways for which there are no precedents. Best practices would no longer be sufficient. Now, this was June of last year, and this was before anybody started talking about credit crunches and economic slowdowns. The one thing that he really did highlight was how, as general managers, continued success hangs on our ability to innovate business models and strategies, but also to dramatically reinvent ourselves as circumstances change. So that constant process of adapting. I hope I've given you an understanding that we all took so much from this experience. We're actually still together as a group. We have a group website, we have a blog. Bizarrely, I've had an email whilst I've been here this morning from someone talking about their business levels in their hotel they operate in Kenya. We've got lots of reunions planned, and you also get to graduate, which was relatively positive. Whilst I'm up here, it would of course be remiss of me not to take the opportunity on behalf of my fellow leadership scholars to thank Stephen, David, Beverly, the trustees and everybody involved in HIT for their faith in us. We were the sort of guinea pigs going over to Cornell, and it was just an amazing experience. The phrase life-changing is often an overused cliche, but our trip to Cornell really has changed our lives. It's given us that opportunity to give more back to our businesses and our teams and of course to Scottish hospitality. Thank you.